This is the moment that we all need to make some choices, right? For what comes next, digital ID and so on, that is the ultimate in where all the conspiracy theories are going, and that is centralized control.
But once you start seeing money as psychological leverage, the whole entire system starts looking different. And debt is just like engineered obedience. It keeps people compliant, it makes people predictable, and way too overwhelmed to question the system at all. So you're not going to need chains to lock people up if you could just have compound interest.
Money at this point is authority, but it's tied to self-worth.
Money isn't really just that math, it's behavioral control. And a government doesn't need to punish you if they can just influence what you fear losing. So I think a lot of people think they're managing their finances, their checkbook, their accounts, but what they're actually managing is their sense of safety and self-worth.
Those who have a lot of money are seen as having a lot of influence, power, and authority. And this authority part is pretty important, especially what I'll show you in just a little bit. So money itself, basically, although it has that perceived authority and so on, is actually just an agreed upon hallucination.
Fiat currency is a socially agreed hallucination. And as long as everybody's kind of nodding along, it works. But if belief breaks, the value disappears, and that fragility should terrify people that are paying attention.
Even though it's agreed upon a hallucination, it's actually seen as very real. I mean, people go to work, they get money, and they can continue to live by things and so on and so forth. So even though they know it's not real, it's still, okay, this is what I use, right? So then supposing all this, then the next question is, well, who is it actually in control?
Who owns the food systems? Who owns the energy systems? Who owns green energy systems? Who owns the military industrial complex? Who owns transportation? Okay. And by now we kind of all know, and I kind of arrived at the answer that we all know, is that a bunch of shareholders own the whole system. And the top of every shareholder chart is Vanguard, BlackRock, and State Street. But it's not just a simple, they own the company. They own the shares. And Vanguard, BlackRock, and State Street are at the top of every list because they hold all of our retirement accounts and they hold all of our retirement money. So they manage all these shares on our behalf. And when they manage the shares on our behalf, they manage our voting rights in the corporate system, which is kind of a pay-to-play democracy.
So how could this keep on going? And this is where it gets a little bit scary. Money has turned to authority, and that authority remains even though we can see where it's a hallucination. The thing about authority is it's known to trump everything, including values.
Dr. Stanley Milgram runs this experiment. Will people just follow orders? Essentially got a guy in the room right beside you, strapped up to a machine that's going to shock him. And they sit you down at a machine, and your job is to read off some words. And when he gets a question wrong, you shock his ass. And then you move the shocker up, shock him higher voltage for every wrong answer. You keep moving it up. Thirds of the way through this shocking thing, the guy in the other room, you can hear him screaming. You can hear him yelling when you shock him because the thing's painful. He's an actor. He's not ever getting shocked. But 2/3 of the way through, he stops and he says, I don't want to do this anymore. I want out of here. I have a heart condition. I don't want to do this anymore. And you look back at the guy running the thing in the lab coat. The guy in the lab coat says, experiment requires that you continue. And then these people would get to the end, this 450 volts, and they'd shock him. They're like, well, that's it. We reached the end. The guy in the lab coat says, please continue until you've read all of the questions on the quiz. 67% of people went all the way. It's number one, our inherent obedience to authority or perceived authority.
Now, this, of course, for me, it scares the bejeebies out of me, right? This is where everything dials in. And this is the moment that we all need to make some choices, right? For what comes next, digital ID and so on, that is the ultimate in where all the conspiracy theories are going, and that is centralized control. But we're not there yet. And that's the beautiful part. But it's critical that at this point in time, that we take what we know and actually apply it to things we can do. And I think this is where it gets very simple and a little bit complex at the same time because it involves psychology. And that has to do with developing our own inner authority. Now, think of the experiment, right? The authority took over and bypassed everything. That's because there wasn't a strong enough internal authority to stop and say, this isn't right, I'm not doing it. It's important to remember at this time, none of us are immune to all these different psyops, psychological operations, and so on. Marketing, everything coming at us. And it's impossible to get around all that. You're going to be subject to it. But when you've got an internal authority and you check in with that internal authority on a regular basis, I believe that is actually how we can bypass and start helping ourselves and others along the way. Okay, supposing that you develop your own inner authority. Well, how do you do this? And that's what some of my next videos are going to be about is kind of my exploration in developing more internal authority. But it keys into a lot of how our country was founded, and it keys into spiritual principles and many other things. But I just want to put it out there. I myself grounding a lot more in internal authority and being more conscious of where I'm actually letting that internal authority go subconsciously, just like not even realizing it, right? And that awareness part is really key. I mean, you may think you have internal authority, but we get subject to psyops all the time that kind of bypass all that. My thought is on developing that inner authority and looking at different people like Mark Passio and others that actually ground in what we are at a fundamental level and what laws and precepts of authority that we follow that are very simple, very powerful, and not based in the external authorities that they have actually subject us to. Just as a side note, ending note for all those that are still here, thank you. I'm really trying in my videos to really open up more to the exploration rather than just the conclusions of things, really delving into the story and showing how that exploration happened in the different places I'm going to get there. And I'm hoping that actually opens up things a lot more. I also have the group that I'm starting at school that basically I'm trying as much as possible to develop like different exercises and projects that actually move things forward and uses things that you learn rather than just, watching a video, reading a book, and then just being done with it. It's like, okay, let's actualize some projects that really move the needle forward and get us to go deeper and deeper in a practical sense. Because although all this is interesting, if you let it just go by you as truth entertainment, so to speak, I don't think we're going to get anywhere, right? So that's where I'm going next on all this. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you next time.